Hello guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you're watching me from. This is Joy Victory TV channel. My name is Joy Victory, and today I just want to take a deep moment to thank every one of you for always coming back to watch my videos. Thank you so much for your subscriptions. Thank you so much to the ones who noticed my absence and went extra to just reach out to me and ask whether I was doing fine. Thank you so much. I do not take this for granted. And I'm also here to announce to you that the Young Leaders Africa will be hosting its first feeding program. That is next year in the month of February on 15th. 15th coming 15th next month, come 15th February 2027, we are going to be hosting our very first feeding program, the Turkana edition, in the lands of Turkana. And perhaps that is an appropriate way to begin today's conversation, because today we're talking about something that every one of us possesses, whether you consciously manage it or not. That is your name. And more specifically, we are talking about personal branding, but I want to approach this subject quite differently. I'm not going to spend hours here to tell you to choose a specific color palette, or maybe create a beautiful logo, or maybe take professional photographs, or maybe write an attractive Instagram biography, or maybe posting consistently. No, those are things that have their place, yes, certainly, but they're merely the visible architecture of something much deeper. I want us to talk about reputation. I want us to talk identity. I want us to talk about credibility, competence, perception, influence, values, and even the legacy that we leave behind. And I want to begin with a man whose story, in my opinion, provides one of the most fascinating and uncomfortable lessons about personal branding. His name is Marcel Reich, famously known as McRich. McRich became one of the most powerful commodity traders of his generation. He was a remarkably successful business person who played a significant role in transforming the international oil trading industry and accumulated enormous wealth. And his story is chronicled in Daniel Annan's The King of Oil, or maybe let me say The Secret Lives of McRich, a book that explores both the extraordinary business achievements and the controversies that surrounded McRich. But here, what makes his story particularly relevant to our conversation is that McRich's name became associated with two different things. On the other hand, there was an extraordinary commercial brilliance, there was ambition, there was innovation, there was wealth, there was international influence, and a remarkable ability to see opportunities in markets that other people either ignored or did not understand, or maybe had no idea about. On the other hand, there was controversy. His business dealings became the subject of serious legal scrutiny. He was indicted in the United States in the 1980s, fled the country, and remained abroad for years. Decades later, his controversial presidential pardon by the former US President Bill Clinton reignited public debate about his life and legacy. And suddenly, we are confronted with a question that is much deeper than what entrepreneurship really is. What happens when the success attached to your name is enormous, but so is the controversy attached to it? What happens when people know about you, and when people know you, but they do not necessarily know, they do not necessarily agree with what you present as a person? What happens when your achievements are undeniable but your reputation remains contested? And perhaps the most important question of all is that is what is when people hear your name, what exactly do they remember? That leads us to what I mean by creating a reputation. You understand? Remember, you already have a personal brand. That is your name. Let me begin with something that may sound quite paradoxical. You do not actually need a personal brand. You already have one, which is your name. The only question is whether you're cultivating it intentionally or allowing circumstances, other people, or maybe your own behavior to construct it on your behalf. Think about someone you know personally. You probably do not need a written description to explain who that person is. When their name is mentioned, certain association immediately appears. Perhaps you might be thinking about their intelligence, their brilliance, their generosity, how maybe they're always late in every single event you attend. And it's more about what people notice, the notice that has happened. That is reputation. And reputation is one of the fundamental components of personal branding. Your brand is not simply what you announce that is not what you announce about yourself. It's about what people have learned to expect from you through your repeated actions, through your repeated interactions. You can write in your bios that you're a visionary entrepreneur, but if you've not built anything around it, people will eventually notice the discrepancy around your brand. You can actually describe yourself as a very compassionate person, but if everyone works with you, they experience arrogance, they experience dismissals. The description will not survive contact with reality. That is why I believe personal branding should begin with self-examination, and it should begin with self-examination before self-promotion. Before you ask, how can I become more visible? Ask yourself, what exactly will people discover if they look closely? That is a much more uncomfortable question, but it's much more valuable question. There comes a point in a person's life when their name begins to carry value and independently of their job title. Consider someone whose name has become synonymous with exceptional legal work, or maybe let's talk of a doctor whose judgment has earned extraordinary trust, and what comes in mind is Dr. John Jagi, or an entrepreneur whose reputation makes investors comfortable entering a room before the proposal has become fully presented. Something interesting has really happened. The person's name has become a form of social and professional capital. Their name produces uncertainty. If someone tells you about this particular person, you already know that you already know that the approach to this person has, as though you're dealing with someone who is an unknown person, you have an expectation. The expectation is valuable. That is why reputation compounds. One excellent project can produce a recommendation. Then the recommendation can also produce a client. The client can produce another relationship. That relationship can produce another opportunity. And over time, the original work begins generating opportunities that did not exist when it was just an idea on paper. This is one of the reasons as to why I find personal branding quite fascinating. It sits at the intersection of psychology, communication, economics, and even the human relationships. And your competence creates value. Your repetition communicates that competence, the competence you created. Your relationships distribute that reputation, and eventually your name begins to carry information before you even speak. That is an extraordinary asset. But it's also a responsibility, because once your name acquires value, every decision you make can either strengthen or diminishes it. So today, I want us to talk about the lessons we learn from Macrich. How success can either create a bad or a good reputation. This is where I want us to go back to the book. I think there is something intellectually dishonest about discussing successful entrepreneurs as though financial achievement is sufficient evidence of admirable character. It's not. Macrich was extraordinarily successful, but his story is also controversial. The contradiction is precisely what makes it more useful. In this book by Daniel Anand, The King of Oil, it portrays a man of enormous commercial ability, but it also examines the controversies, the legal battles that he faced, and also the political circumstances that became inseparable from his public identity. And that teaches us a lesson that achievement and reputation are related, but they are not identical. In other words, they are very parallel. You can achieve enormous things and still have a complicated reputation. You can make billions and still be distrusted. You can become very famous and still be disliked by people. You can become more powerful without even being without even being respected. You can become respected without becoming particularly famous, and these distinctions really matter. You need to understand the differences that happens here. We live in a culture that sometimes assumes that visibility is a proof of value. I want to say it's not. And wealth is certainly not a proof of virtue. The question is not simple. The question is not simply how successful you are. The more sophisticated the question is, like, what does your success represent? This is the question I want you to carry through I want you to carry with throughout the entire episode of personal branding, because if you build a very successful career while simultaneously destroying trust, reputations, and credibility, you may discover that you have accumulated wealth while impoverishing your reputation. And reputation, unlike money, cannot always be repaired through your other transactions. So visibility is not influence. We've entered an era in which people think that visibility is remarkably inexpensive. You can create an account today and potentially reach people on the other side of the planet by tonight. A single video can receive million views. It can really go viral, and a photograph can really circulate through thousands of social accounts, and a controversial statement can make someone famous within hours. But visibility is not influence. A person can be watched by millions and trusted by a very few people. Another person can have a modest audience and exercise an extraordinary influence within a specific field. Consider the difference between a viral entertainer and a respected surgeon. Both may be visible, but their influence operates differently. One may capture attention, and the other may shape decisions that determine whether someone lives or dies. And a good example, I'm going to compare these two people. There is this one rider here in Nairobi. He's well known for his helmet. I was listening to a certain podcast and people are asking what brand deals does he have, and apparently they realized that he doesn't have brands. He doesn't have brands that he is marketing. And then we have this particular doctor on TikTok who is famous. He's a famous endometriosis surgeon, Dr. John Jaggi. Whenever this topic endometriosis rises, people will always tag him. So remember, their influence operates differently. One may capture attention, and the other may shape decisions that determine whether someone lives or dies. This is why I think people building personal brands should ask themselves a more serious question: how many people saw me? Uh, like, what did my presence cause people to think of me? Or maybe what did my presence cause people to feel of me? Or maybe how do they understand me? That is closer to influence. Attention is fleeting. Influence has consequences, and if ambition is to build something enduring, you should be much more interested in consequences than the impressions that comes with your brand. So another thing I want us to discuss is about the territory that comes with your brand. One of the reasons some people become extraordinarily compelling is that they possess what I would call an intellectual territory. They really have these subjects that they have thought about so extensively that their perspective becomes recognizable, and they do not merely repeat information, they interpret it. That is a major distinction. Information is abundant, interpretation is scarce. We can also search for facts. That what is more difficult is understanding what those facts really mean, and how many people connect to other ideas and what they matter. This is where reading becomes incredibly important. If you're building a personal brand, read beyond your immediate profession. You need to read people's biographies, read history, read psychology, philosophy, literature, memes, read books written by people whose opinions you disagree with. You need to read about businesses that have failed, read about the businesses that became institutions, read about the leaders who succeeded and even the leaders who destroyed themselves. Because the more intellectually diverse you read, your reading becomes, the more connections you begin to see. And those connections become perspective, and your personal brand becomes much stronger when you have something distinctive to say. So this is where I think we should free ourselves from the illusion that personal branding begins with Instagram. Most people think that because they have a huge number of followers on Instagram, that they have created a very big brand. No, it did not. People were building reputations long before social media existed, and that a good example I've given you is Mark Rich. We also have Madam C.J. Walker, whose story is chronicled in biographies such as On Her Own Ground by Leila Bundles. This lady Walker became one of America's most successful self-made business person by building a beauty empire directed primarily towards black women at a time when racial and gender barrier were profoundly restrictive. What intersects about this lady is not simply about the money she made, it's about the intentionality she had, the idea she had on paper. She understood her audience. She understood the problems she was solving when racism was the biggest factor. She understood the representation, and she built a business identity around a specific community and a specific need. That is branding before the word became fashionable. And now let's consider Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, I mean. And you can also, like, you people have known much about him, and also you've also understood about the Apple company. You've also understood the Knights brand, I mean. And also, let us talk about authenticity that comes with personal branding. I hear people say that I just want to be authentic. That is admirable when you say it, but authenticity has been misunderstood by many. It does not mean that the public is entitled to every private detail about you. You can be authentic without being completely exposed. You can tell the truth without telling every story, and you can share your experience while preserving the dignity and privacy of the other people involved. There is a difference between vulnerability and exhibitionism. Vulnerability has purpose, exhibitionism often seeks attention. You understand? And as your audience grows, you'll have to become increasingly sophisticated about the distinctions. Not every heartbreak is content. Not every argument deserves an audience. Not every financial difficulty needs to be documented. Not every family matter belongs on the internet. Some things need to remain sacred. Your brand should not consume your private life. It should communicate more of your public contribution. And this leads us to where your story should become a source of meaning. One of the strongest things you can bring to a personal brand is your story. But your story becomes powerful. It becomes more powerful when you learn how to extract meaning from your own story. Suppose you tell me that your business failed, that is an event. But if you tell me that your failure taught you about preparation, maybe ego, the cash flow, customer behavior, or leadership, you've transformed an event into knowledge. That is what makes storytelling more valuable. It's a very basic tool. Your audience does not need to know every detail of your life, they need to understand what your experiences have taught you. And this is one of the reasons biographies are so fascinating. When we read about people like Steve Jobs, Madam C.J. Walker, Phil Knight, or even the Oprah Winfrey, we are not merely consuming chronology. We are studying decisions, we are examining patterns, we are watching people encounter uncertainty, we are observing how ambition interacts with failure, how character interacts with opportunity, and how individuals respond when circumstances stop cooperating with them. Your own life can become a similar source of insight if you learn to examine it honestly. And another thing is that you need to build your brand around evidence. One of the greatest problems with modern personal branding is the inflation of titles. Everybody is a strategist, everybody is a consultant, everybody is a coach, everybody is a visionary, everybody is a thoughtful leader, but titles are cheap, evidence is quite expensive. If you call yourself an entrepreneur, I want to know what you've built. If you call yourself a writer, I want to know what you're writing. If you call yourself a strategist, I want to see the results of your strategy. And if you call yourself a leader, I want to see the evidence that people trust you enough to follow your direction. This does not mean you must wait until you're perfect. It means your public claims should remain proportionate to your demonstrated ability. This is something I learned from Benihinwa Lubengo. There is nothing wrong with saying I'm learning, and there is nothing wrong with saying that I'm building, and also there is nothing wrong with saying that you're becoming. In fact, there is something deep attractive about intellectual honesty. You do not have to pretend to have arrived, and you can invite people to witness the journey without you just having to prove a point. And another thing I want us to learn is that there is competence before confidence. We live in a culture that sometimes encourages confidence before competence. Believe in yourself, act like you already have it, like fake it until you make it. That is the perception that the society has really taught us. And I understand the psychological appeal of these messages, but I think they become more dangerous when taken literally, because now you see this fake it until you make it, you start living a life that is even more expensive. You should develop confidence, yes, but confidence should eventually have something underneath. That is competence. You understand? Like, I'm teaching you on how to create competence. Learn the craft, study, practice the craft, find the people who are better than you, accept criticism, because both negative and positive shape in us. Make mistakes, analyze those mistakes, try again. There's a particular kind of confidence that emerges after years of doing difficult things, and it's more quieter. It does not need to announce itself. It does not enter every room trying to prove that it belongs there. It simply knows that it simply knows what it can contribute. that that is the kind of confidence that you want to build as a person, not performative confidence, just an earned confidence. And let's talk about consistency is not constant online activity. Another misconception is that consistency means posting every single day. This one I'm going to relate it with business, because I'm also a business person. When you walk through these marketing strategies, they'll always tell you to post consistently. It does not. Consistency means that your audience repeatedly encounters a recognizable standard. And if you're known for your thoughtful conversation, the quality of your thinking should remain recognizable. If you're known for entrepreneurship, your business insights should have substance. If you're known for mental wellness, your discussions should demonstrate responsibility rather than sensationalism. If you are known for leadership, your own conduct should not constantly contradict your message. So there is so much. Consistency is therefore primarily about frequency. It's about coherence. It's your audience should eventually know what intellectual and emotional experience they are likely to receive when they encounter you, or maybe encounter your work. That is much more valuable than simply being everywhere. There is where personal this is where personal branding becomes much more serious. What you believe in, what will you refuse to compromise, what do you do when money conflicts with your principles, how do you treat people who cannot benefit from you, how do you speak about people who are not present, and how do you respond when somebody beneath you makes a mistake, how do you behave when nobody important is watching? These questions reveal your value. The values are very much important because reputation is tested during the moments of pressure. It's easier to appear ethical when ethical behavior costs you nothing. The more difficult test arrives when dishonesty will be profitable. It's easy to speak about kindness when you're surrounded by the people that you admire all the time. The deeper the test is, the deeper test is how to treat someone who is of no influence to your life. Your reputation is built in the moments, not in the carefully edited photographs that you people post out here, not in the motivational captions that we read out here, and in the ordinary interactions that nobody thinks about that really will become the evidences against us some days. And remember that there is something also that we talk about, that is the digital footprints. The marks that we leave behind is part of your reputation. Finally, in this major section of our conversation about the digital footprints, the marks we leave behind, we have to talk about the digital world. Your online identity is no longer entirely separate from your personal identity. A potential employer can search for your name online, yes. A client can also search for your name online, yeah. And also a potential business partner can also search for your name online, and someone considering to invite you to speak can also search for your name online. And before they meet you, they may also already possess an impression of you. This is necessarily unfair. This is not necessarily unfair. It's simply the reality of the environment we are now inhabiting. So before you post something, I want you to develop the habit of asking your question, will this I want you to develop the habit of asking a better question than will this get attention. This is something I was dealing with when I was starting my channel. I was like, am I going to get famous like D Wango and I am Mara and other established YouTube channels? But then again, I asked myself, I'd rather have a less audience, but let them benefit something from me. So the question that I asked myself was, what does this communicate about my judgment? Because every public action communicates something. Sometimes the message is intentional, sometimes my message may not be intentional, but it's there. So now, having established those 13 principles that I've talked about, I want us to go deeper into the stories of people who understood, sometimes consciously and sometimes instinctively, that building a business and building a reputation are deeply connected. We have I've talked about let's talk about this founder of Starbucks. He did not just sell coffee. His journey, I think this man is called is it Charles? It's just it's his brand was more beyond just making coffee. It's all an experience. He understood that there was an emotional dimension to the business and the coffee really mattered, but so did the environment, the ritual, the identity, the feeling of belonging. The brand became larger than the product, and this is an important lesson for anyone building a personal brand, especially business people. People may initially discover you because of what you do, but they may also remain because of how you interact, how interacting with you makes them feel. Do they feel intellectually stimulated? Do they feel understood? Do they feel challenged? Do they feel inspired? Do they feel like you respect their intelligence? Those experiences become part of your brand. Let's talk about Oprah Winfrey, the power of human connection. Her story documented in biographies such as Kitty Kelly's, and the biography and the biography explored about his public career. It demonstrates another dimension of personal branding, the transformation of personal narrative into cultural influence. Oprah did not just build an international media identity merely by appearing in a television. She just built a relationship with audiences. People felt that they knew something about her. They trusted her emotional intelligence. They associated her name with conversation, vulnerability, aspiration, and even the transformation that came with her. Whether one admires every aspect of her brand or not, the strategic lesson is undeniable. She created an environment in which her personal identity became inseparable from the experiences of other platforms. That is powerful branding. But it also comes with enormous responsibility. Once people trust you, your words acquire certain weight, and that is why influence should always be accompanied by responsibility. You need to be responsible for your influence. That is something I learned from this personal branding strategist by the name Nom Deni from South Africa. You understand? So there is so many people that we're going to talk about. We have talked about, and I've also talked about McRich again. I'm going back to McRich because today's topic was built by what I read about McRich, because his story sits beautifully and uncomfortable at the center of everything we have been discussing. He understands market, he understands opportunity, he understands international commerce. He built extraordinary wealth. He became more influential. His name carried enormous weight, but his story also demonstrates that the market can assign a monetary value of your achievements without necessarily assigning moral value of your character. Those are different currencies, and I think ambitious people need to understand this. You can become extraordinarily successful and still have questions surrounding your legacy. You can become extraordinarily wealthy and still leave people debating what your name is and what your name ultimately represents. So when you're building your own brand, I want you to think beyond immediate success. Think about the long-term meaning of your reputation, because your name is not just merely an instrument of getting opportunities, it's also the container into which you're depositing your decisions. Every year you are adding something. Some years you add competence, some years you add relationships, some years you add mistakes, some years you add wisdom, some years you lose things, but the accumulation becomes your story as a person. So the person you the person you are when nobody is watching is what I'm trying to talk about, and perhaps this is the most important part of the entire conversation. Your strongest personal brand is often built in rooms where there is no camera. It's built when you decide to read instead of remain ignorant. It's built when you keep a promise nobody could have forced you to keep. It also means it's built when you pay someone what you owe them. Yeah, that's lipeni madeni. It's built when you apologize. It's also built when you refuse to exploit someone simply because you cannot. It's also built when you continue working despite the absence of an applause. Most of us really want to work so that we can be seen. It's also built when you choose integrity over convenience. Those moments may never become content, but they become character, and eventually character becomes reputation. That is why I do not want you to spend all your energy asking how to look successful as a person. Ask yourself how to become the kind of person whose success can survive scrutiny, just as McRich. Because eventually every performance comes to an end. The camera will always eventually will always go off. The audience will eventually leave. The evidence concludes. The followers will always move on, and you remain with yourself. That person is the foundation of your brand. So I know we've come to the end of our today's conversation. I want to return to the question with which we began. What will your name mean? Not today, not on Instagram, not according to the number of people you currently recognize. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe your business has changed, when your appearance has changed, when your technology has changed, when the trends we currently obsess over have become irrelevant, what will remain? Your name. And what will people associate it with? What will they say about you? What will they say? Will they say that you are brilliant but impossible to trust? Will they say that you are wealthy but indifferent? Will they say that you are famous but empty? Or will they say that she built something, or maybe he built something, he kept their word, they treated people with dignity? Like, what are people going to talk about you? Because eventually personal branding should become less about manufacturing an image and more about cultivating a reputation that reflects substance. And I think of McRich, I think of a complicated relationship between achievement and legacy. I think of Madam C.J. Walker and the significance of building something for a community that had been overlooked. Remember, she had a business. So I think of 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 Charles as a transformation of a commodity into an experience. I think of Oprah Winfrey and the power of human connection. And I just think of many people. And I think of every entrepreneur, professional, creator, and a young person who is currently somewhere between the person they are and the person they hope to become. This is where our lives matter. In between, there is nothing wrong with that. You do not need to have arrived to begin building a reputation. You simply need to be deliberate about what you're becoming. So read, go extra in reading, learn, develop competence, build relationship, take your work seriously, risk if it's possible, protect your credibility, treat people well and rightly. Do not allow people to do not allow the pursuit of visibility to make your sacrifice substantial. And also, I want you to also do not confuse a large audience with a meaningful life. The internet cannot make you visible. The internet can introduce you. Only your competence can sustain you. The internet can give you the attention you need. Only the value can convert the attention into influence, and the internet can make people know your name. But only the life you build can determine that. You can determine what that name really means. As for me, I'm continuing to build. Through the Victory TV channel, I want to create conversations that are intellectually stimulating, emotionally honest, and genuinely useful. Through the Young Leaders Africa, I want to continue exploring what leadership looks like when it leaves the boardroom and enters real communities. And on the 15th of February, come and on the 15th of February 2027, we will be taking our first Turkana edition feeding session forward. And if God touches your heart to partner with us, sponsor us, or contribute towards the initiative, please reach us through the contact that I'll provide. And to everyone who has been watching my content, subscribing, sharing, sending messages, and patiently waiting for my return, thank you so much. I'm genuinely grateful. And if you're new here, welcome to the Victory TV channel. I hope you stay. I hope you read. I hope you question. I hope you disagree with me when you have a reason to. And I also hope these conversations become a place where we can just engage with ideas rather than merely consume entertainment. Because ultimately, I do not want to build a platform where people simply come to watch me. I want to build a platform where people come to think. My name is Joy Victory. I'm the founder of the Young Leaders Africa, a solo traveler, a mental wellness coach, a young Kenyan entrepreneur, and a woman behind Joy Victory TV. Thank you so much. I've been away for a while, but I'm back, and I'm returning with a renewed understanding that becoming is not an event. Once again, it's a process, it's discipline, it's the accumulation of thousands of seemingly insignificant decisions. So wherever you're watching from, wherever you are in your career, your business, your education, or your personal journey, I want you to ask yourself one final question before you leave this conversation. If your name became known around the world tomorrow, would you be proud of that? Will you be proud of what it currently represents? If the answer is yes, protect it. If the answer is no, do not panic. You have time to rebuild it. You have time to relearn. You have time to become, because your personal brand is not merely the story you tell the whole world. It's the evidence you leave behind, the legacy you leave behind. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. Thank you so much for listening. And until our next conversation, keep learning, keep building, keep questioning, and above all, become the kind of person whose name carries weight even when there is no microphone in front of you. I am Joy Victory, and